Rohit Morani here, one of the co-founders here of Office Hours. Idea is that we've helped out, honestly, over the last couple of years, over 1,000 individuals break into banking, break into private equity. We're basically getting to the point, Jay, of literally offering up guarantees that you come to us, you go through our program, and we will help you get a job guaranteed, whether it be in banking, whether it be on the buy side. We're pretty darn rigorous when it comes to thinking through the individuals. Frankly, a lot of vetting, right? GPAs, requirements, what are you looking to do? Where are you looking to work? Are you at a bank today? Are you looking to go to the buy side? How realistic is it, right? That mega fund that you're kind of aiming for. Do you know much about it type of situation? So we really try to educate many of our mentees as a whole. But Jay, thank you so much, man. Honestly, you and I connected, I want to say, probably during platinum equity timeframe, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, probably SoCal, I think it was too.
Yep.
Love it. So, but I mean, obviously you bring extensive experience here in the space. We'd love to learn a little bit more around your background, and then maybe you want to start off with an introduction.
Yeah, sure. So maybe on the personal side first. So born and raised in Texas. I actually grew up overseas most of my life. So spent time in Europe, Asia, finished high school in Venezuela, and then came back to Texas for college. So the University of Texas at Austin. Initially thought I was going to be a dentist just because my older brother was in pursuing med school, and I also wanted to be called a doctor, but ended up trying out the whole finance route. Got my internship in investment banking at Bank of America, Merrill Lynch. Joined there full time, and then joined a few private equity firms doing infrastructure at Pantheon in San Francisco, followed by more of a generalist role at Platinum in Los Angeles. And then I recently joined Curo Pet Care. We are a search fund consolidating the veterinary space, and joined them almost 2 years now.
I love it. That's awesome. I remember we were connecting around, of course, you looking at Kiro and effectively evaluating joining them. Time flies.
Yeah, it sure did.
That's phenomenal. If we take a step back, because I mean, there's so many questions to get into, right? The search fund side of things, what it looked like on the infra, then generalist, how banking set you up for those various opportunities. If we take it back quite a bit, high school in Venezuela, tell us more, man. I actually don't have too much insight into that other than, of course, looking at your LinkedIn, but we'd love to learn a little bit more how that came about.
Yeah, so it was actually one of my favorite countries I lived in. It was still pretty dangerous, but not as bad as what it is today. But it was just nice where school was easier. But every day after school, we'd all be on the beaches and just doing water sports. And it's nice to it was definitely a way more relaxing lifestyle than what I'm used to today, especially. But the culture, the Spanish music, everything, it was just fun to be a part of it and get to immerse myself in it.
Wow. And it was family reasons that you ended up there?
Yeah. So my dad, we moved around every couple of years because my dad's job.
Oil and gas, or call it.
Yep, exactly.
That makes sense. Nice. Very cool. How was the high school experience as a whole? And as you were looking into college, what did that transition look like? So you were really thinking kind of like dentist, medicine side of the house?
Yeah. So I was applying to all of the direct dental programs where you don't take the DAT, but yeah, but then my brother convinced me to just go to UT Austin, go to state school and enjoy it. And if you're smart enough, somebody in some dental school will accept you, and really thought that was the route I was going to take. So I was just kind of triple majoring throughout college with pre-dent track on the side as well, dual streaming the whole finance and dentistry route. And then I think sophomore year, I got an internship at an oil company, and that really got me into oil and gas investment banking, as Houston's a huge recruiting town for UT Austin. And then after my internship, really liked it. And so it just kind of made sense to drop dentistry after that.
Yeah, no, I mean, that makes sense. I think that's part of the reason that honestly, internships exist as a whole, right?
Yeah, exactly. My parents were a bit disappointed not going to get dental care for the rest of their life, but.
And then tell us a little bit more around kind of what that internship looked like. And then of course, kind of that thought process around call it banking as a whole, right? Because of course, I'm sure to a certain degree, campus recruitment, and of course, kind of thinking through maybe what sort of sectors you want to cover. Do you want to be on the banking side of things? Do you want to be on the trading side?
Yeah, to be honest, I just felt like everybody in business school, and at least the honors program I was in, was trying to go for investment banking. And I was pretty gung-ho on, going I was pretty focused on the dentistry route. So I didn't really know too much on, different, trading versus investment banking versus all the other options. And so kind of just got lucky, to be honest. And during my internship, I remember before recruiting, there was a whole super week in January. Mm-hmm. Investment banks came to UT, and we were just being interviewed pretty much over a span of a week, and then they'd call us into their offices and then present offers within 24 hours. So it was a really intense couple weeks there. But I'm glad it just, I guess, kind of went into it not knowing what to expect, but, came out really pleasantly surprised with the whole experience.
Yep. So tell us a little bit more, if you don't mind me asking. So it was private wealth and then moved over to banking, right? How does one do that? And a lot of Merrill experience, right? And kind of like really getting to know the firm.
Yeah, I think especially at like cities like Austin and smaller cities, there's always like private wealth opportunities. You just got to reach out to that bank, and sure, you're not doing any crazy intense modeling experience, but at least being in that environment where you can surround yourself with high finance folks and just learn from them really does help you kind of figure out, is this something that you see yourself doing in the long term?
Would you say that, what did that pivot look like from private wealth to banking? And would you say that that's something that individuals can emulate today?
Yeah, I think so. I think investment banks, especially like summer internships, they just want to see some experience on your belt, on your resume. And so as long as you're doing, I think for me, the whole Chevron internship in oil and gas, doing that after private wealth, having that oil and gas experience really made my resume more favorable to some of the oil and gas investment banks in Houston. So even if it's not private wealth, but maybe there's like an industry where you could get an internship and then leverage that to one of the bank groups that are specialized in that industry, I think it could definitely help on the recruiting side.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. We tend to hear this quite a bit, right? We have individuals. I was connecting with an individual earlier today, and he's looking into I think it's called TRTX, TPG's real estate platform. But the idea is if you can't necessarily get into banking, so then you focus on whether it be real estate brokerage, commercial side of things, and then from there potentially try to lateral, whether it be into banking or private equity, but always creative ways, right? To kind of think about that. As we kind of think about, of course, banking as a whole and what happened thereafter, right? Well, if we start off, how was your time at Merrill, right? And when people think of BAML today, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, of course, after kind of this massive transaction that went down, from what you hear around individuals in banking today, you're going to say, call it started banking in 2014. Yep. We're in 2022. Do you still have friends in banking? Have you had those conversations around how things have differentiated? I'm not sure if you kept in touch with people in that same group. Have they kind of spread out all over from an alumni network perspective?
Yeah, so I'm still in touch with my analyst class. There were 6 of us.
Nice.
Going to each other's weddings and whatnot. But at this point, nobody's in investment banking. I think one guy ended up lateraling to a different bank after many years, but all of us kind of moved on to private equity, strategy, corporate debt, something along those lines.
Nice. But still in finance to a certain degree, whether it be buy side, sell side, more or less. It sounds like it's more buy side, but that honestly just brings up the point of really keeping in touch with a lot of people, right?
Yeah. Sorry. There's just background noise that I couldn't hear you.
Don't worry about it. No worries. No, I was just thinking basically the network carries a lot of weight, right? Those 6 individuals that you had mentioned, which I think definitely applies quite a bit. So if we dive into, of course, the infrastructure and real asset space, and then of course, going down the route of a little bit more generalist, and then from there, a little bit more even on the healthcare side. Tell us a little bit more. Was the infrastructure or real asset side, it just ended up being a natural parallel? Is that something that you wanted to pursue from the onset? Was the idea bro, I want to get to generalist, but this was my way there?
Yeah, good question. So I felt like coming out of oil and gas investment banking out of Houston, it definitely pigeonholed me to mostly oil and gas private equity firms. And infrastructure kind of fell into that section as well. And so that was really the main reason why I ended up going to an infrastructure private equity firm. I think it was just most relevant with all of my experience. And to be honest, I kind of just took every job as I wasn't really planning for it. I feel like a lot of people just want to plan their 2-year, 5-year, 10 years out. And I kind of just had to go job by job and was just, deciding once I got there, what's my next step, what I want to do. And I think just having that infrastructure private equity experience though really was what landed me my job at Platinum, doing more of a generalist private equity route company, because then at least I had some more private equity experience that even though it's still oil and gas.
Yep, that makes sense. Would you give that advice to individuals, or how would you position it when it comes to individuals thinking through hey, I'm in oil and gas today, but I might be looking to make an industry switch or maybe go a little bit more generalist, right? Individuals that are healthcare bankers or consumer bankers, and then looking to go maybe a little bit more generalist. How do you advise something like that? And I'm sure you've seen it on the other end, right? When you're interviewing individuals and thinking through that as well, being listening to stories about the pivot.
Yeah. So I think there's a few ways you can do what I did. Generalist private equity firms, they do appreciate some sort of private equity experience, whether it's super focused on one industry or not. So I think that's one route. The other option is it is easier to land more of a strategy or finance role at just a Fortune 500, or I guess it's not easy, but it's definitely more doable. And so I think people could pivot from healthcare banking or oil and gas banking, go to a tech company, get that experience, and then go into more of a private equity on a generalist or a different industry based on that company.
That makes sense. And when you think about it, how how tangential was that role itself, right? Coming from the real assets infrastructure side of things, I'm sure to a certain degree, like, of course, Platinum is pretty business services oriented, but how was the learning curve on learning more about other industries as a whole? Was there kind of that like thought in the back of the head, like, hey, listen, I'm going to try this out for a little bit, maybe pursue healthcare down the line? I think Kiro, we can get to that thereafter, kind of learning more about that opportunity, but really just getting an understanding of like, if someone does deal with a pivot, how do you ramp on that learning curve to get an understanding of that new industry?
Yeah. So I think the good thing is that you go to a generalist firm. So we evaluated so many different companies. Like I remember one of them was a diabetes company. Nobody on the deal team really was an expert into it or, expert going into it. And so I don't necessarily think I was at a disadvantage when we started evaluating that company and the industry. If anything, coming in as an associate or senior associate, you're expected to do a lot of the market research and get up to speed first before the rest of the team. So doing like reference calls and just reading appropriate articles and just really diving into it. I think that's a good thing about going to a generalist firm is that you're kind of nobody's an expert until after that deal is done to some degree. And so even though my past experience wasn't oil and gas, I think even if I came from like a different industry and was going to a generalist firm, I think you really got to dive into the details of whatever company you're looking at. And chances are probably don't have that much experience going into it.
No, that makes sense. Any advice that you would give to Jay, call it like 8 to 10 years prior, as you were thinking through getting into banking, real assets, traditional private equity, kind of maybe something today that you would think back like, hey, I wish I knew this back then?
I wish I stressed out as much about everything. Like everything happens for a reason. Everything kind of just works out at the end. And you have a good attitude and you're positive about whatever you're working on. Just kind of live in the moment and everything will kind of play itself out.
No, I think that honestly makes a lot of sense. Tell us a little bit more, Jay. So San Francisco to LA, you've lived in Houston before. I know you spent time in New York. We have many individuals that come to us that generally, New York's a big market, right? For a lot of bankers, New York's a big market for a lot of private equity. But the reality is that they're phenomenal shops kind of all over the country, all over the world to a certain degree. However, there is this like aversion almost to moving, right? And getting kind of out of your comfort zone. How was that on your end?
Yeah, I think I just grew up moving and we had to move everybody.
Well, move for opportunity, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so I think just growing up, having to move around so much, it kind of sucks. You're leaving your friends and your whole like home base behind and you're moving to a new city. But I think every city I did move to, I just got lucky in the sense that there's a big UT network and then just meeting friends of friends. I think you have to be more proactive, especially at this age, when you're not in a university setting to go meet people and make friends. But I think, all right, looks like I got a question. What trends are you currently seeing in the pet industry and what trends do you think will be taking place in 2023 in the pet industry? So seems like, well, thanks for that question, guys. Seems like everybody's been getting dogs and cats during COVID. And so that's really spurred up the industry growth. I think most veterinary clinics that we're looking at are seeing double digit over the last year or so. And I was just answering this anonymous question.
What was the question? And continue. I'm not sure how internet blanked out.
It says, what trends you currently see in the pet industry and what do you think will take place in 2023? I was saying, just especially on the M&A side, there's been a lot of consolidation because of all this growth, especially. I'm sure at some point there's going to be some contraction, especially we're heading into a recession, maybe more on the specialty emergency side where the average bill could easily be like $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 for your pet.
Wow.
Maybe that's when we see a bit more contraction and, during more of a recession time period. But I think on the general practice side where people are doing their check-ins and appointments and whatnot, maybe a smaller contraction, but people still, dogs and cats and, want to make sure they're okay, especially since they're part of family at this point.
Love it. No, I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. Honestly, it's rather unfortunate. I've heard pet adoption went up quite a bit during COVID. And apparently after, frankly, individuals just started, of course, putting their pets up for adoption because they had to go back to work.
Yeah, I read that. I feel like a lot of companies are doing work or, if they're still going to have that work from home or hybrid work from home, maybe that would kind of help decrease or reduce that returning of those pets.
Yeah, no, it's definitely it's a sad moment. We got a dog before then and we still have him.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. Shih Tzu. Yeah. Oh. If you hear him barking in the background, it's because he's not super social, to say the least. But tell us a little bit more. So you're traveling right now. How what does a day-to-day look like? Activeness when it comes to, of course, like visiting sites, facilities, how much autonomy do you have? We'd love to learn more.
Yeah, so day to day, it's really a mix. I feel like what's exciting about this job is no day is the same. We're always looking, there's always some new hospital on sale that we're looking at. I think this whole time we've been really focused on California. All but 2 of our hospitals are based out of here, but now we're actively expanding to different states. It is nice to have that autonomy, like heading up all the M&A at this company. And so just whatever, I feel like I'm at this point where they're trusting me of my valuation, the route we want to take for each of these hospitals. So it has been a lot easier to just discuss it with our team and just put in the offer and hope for the best from that perspective. I think there's a good mix of M&A, diligence, corp dev, operations, and site travels. I think probably half of my time on like the corp dev and M&A side. The half we're spending time like traveling, going to different hospitals, meeting doctors, and just getting our name there really.
That's phenomenal. Do you think that an individual that only did banking would be positioned for this, or it's in all honesty, right? Like now you're seeing all aspects being an operator effectively. And I guess my real question ends up being like, is there any perfect time to make that jump, right? A lot of people will say like, oh, I want to go to business school. I want to do my banking. I want to do my private equity, and then maybe eventually start my own thing. We had my friend on last week. I'm not sure if you're able to see, but he started his own fund. And I think his whole concept was like, I don't think there's any like perfect time, but at some point you can start dabbling with stuff outside of your day to day, right? And see how actively involved you can get. And eventually, if that side gig gets big enough, you make the jump. It's a little tougher to do in traditional finance. But yeah, I mean, we'd love to learn more, we'd love to learn a little bit more around your prior experience and how that's best positioned you today, even though technically you didn't work within the pet care space so much, right? That was maybe a vertical you looked at Platinum?
Yeah, no, it's actually before Platinum. Me and my friend Jimmy, we were just looking at the pet space just for fun when I was at Pantheon. And we were just studying the space, wanted to build out some dog daycare facilities just for fun on the side. So I think when we were looking at that is when I was just studying the pet space. When I was at Platinum, we never really, or at least I never came across any pet space deal. I'm sure like somebody else on a different team did, but I felt every industry I was analyzing, I'd always compare it to the pet space and always found the pet space just to be super exciting and just interesting in its own ways. And so when this opportunity came up to head up M&A at a veterinary consolidator, I just thought it'd be kind of, the best of both worlds here, really. I think every experience I did have had led me to the next job. Like, I don't think I would have been at Platinum without my experience at Pantheon, without my experience at B.B.A. So I do believe like every job I've had has given me different skill sets to really prepare me best for this role.
And different learning opportunities each and every single day, I'm sure. Otherwise, part of it is, of course, like, staying there for those opportunities, kind of that learning curve.
Yep.
Sorry, like you see different opportunities day in and day out where, of course, like as the business gets bigger, more and more things to do.
Yeah, for sure. So I feel like coming to like a company like Kiro, where it's just a small company, I think there's like less than 20 of us. Everybody's just wearing multiple hats at this point. You just kind of help in on different roles and responsibilities. So I do think that does keep every day a new learning curve, I guess.
Yep. Bread and butter on your end when it comes to, as you think about, and we can definitely get to this question in a second here too, but call it if you're pitching to a hospital, what's the 30-second pitch look like and kind of like the bread and butter of Kiro?
Yeah. So I would just talk about like how we're a family-owned veterinary company. We're based out of California. We empower doctors to be co-owners alongside us. So we help out with the back office administrative duties and really help doctors be owners alongside us and, help them maintain that work-life balance. We're really different from the traditional corporate, which is taking over the space because we don't have any debt or finance associated with us. Everything's fully self-funded and we have a much longer-term approach to veterinary care. And I think partnering with us is definitely feels a little bit different. I'm not, talking to a current doctor to you, but I guess we really just highlight the points about us being family-owned, based out of California. We're all owner operators. We're investing our own money here. We're not investing like Blackstone private equity, like $1 billion or something. I think that really resonates with them. Just trend in the space overall, by the way, there's a lot of corporates taking over and unfortunately they're not able to run it as good. I think what really distinguishes us is that we always have a local doctor be a co-owner alongside us. So, whenever you have a vested owner on site, that does make a huge difference to the operations, the customer service, and just everything. I think that's ultimately what makes that hospital the best in its community.
Yep. No, I think definitely that element of like no outside capital, family ownership, really focused, of course, kind of that like boutique angle definitely sells even as you can scale. You'll see many larger companies doing that as well, right? Like family owned like you can see Fidelity is like technically family owned or family managed. They're massive, right? One of the largest asset managers out there.
Yeah, that's true.
It's all part of the story. So a couple of questions deeper more around like private equity in the pet space as a whole, right? Because it's definitely been hot recently. I guess the question is, are you seeing a lot of private equity activity in the pet space? If so, what makes the industry attractive? Do you think it's the lack of sports has seen this quite a bit too, right? Sports teams and organization. Is it just kind of like the whole like general thesis that private equity will take over each and every single vertical inevitably, right? Like consistently moving down the line?
Yeah, I feel like this trend in the pet space have followed the dental space like 5 years later. And we saw this huge consolidation of the dental space like 3 to 5 years ago. And now this all happened in the pet space. I think what's attractive about this space is there's a lot of growth going on. Dogs and cats, like I think when you look at different trends of like how much people are willing to spend on their own pets, that's exponentially increasing year over year. I think the millennials, everybody's getting pets before they're having kids. A lot of people opting to not have kids altogether. And so pets are becoming increasingly more important in the American household. That combined with the margins are really high in the veterinary space, especially. I don't think that's necessarily true for all, different verticals within the pet space. Like I think food and boarding would have lower margins. Veterinary side, I think the cash flow opportunity here does more attractive from the private equity perspective. And then on top of that, the whole space for the most part has been run by older veterinarians. A lot of it, there's a lot of outdated systems in place. For example, like a lot of hospitals that are not paper, they're still on paper records, which everything's kind of being put on the cloud and more digitalized. And they're still like 10 steps backwards from that. I think I guess that's just like how some of these older veterinarians that are not corporate, like the way they do marketing, the way they're doing all of their operations within the hospital, there's so many better ways you could do it. And so I think a lot of, opportunity for growth, both on like the cost savings and revenue generating side here that private equity firms really want to take advantage of.
Yep. And to someone thinking about it, and we'll get to this other question in a second, would you advise almost someone thinking about this potentially going to a firm where they have the opportunity to take advantage of such tailwinds by basically being at like a fund, right? Or going directly to a business that you end up being super passionate about, that you're learning quite a bit about. And you're like, hey, listen, like you're at a fund, right? Like a platinum equity. At the end of the day, your carry is dispersed amongst various deals, amongst various verticals. Technically, your risk is diversified too. Versus, of course, on the operating side, it's like, listen, I'm really going to double down here. Like, my 2 cents would be like, listen, on the operating side, maybe 3-5 years, and then you can see an exit. Fund is longer.
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily one correct way to do it. I do think, going into something more specific, kind of like Kiro, definitely high risk, high reward to some degree. I think what I appreciate about it was more just the autonomy to do everything. And I think at many private equity firms, you have, so many people involved, each handling a different vertical. So I think I really took the opportunity more just to get more, an operational side aspect, just get more of like an operational side to the company or exposure to that. And so that's really what attracted me to it. And
well, being able to take that experience, and then of course you can move forward in different directions. If you want to potentially start your own services org, if you want to start like a search fund within the space, not to mention, of course, just being an operator, right? And really getting an understanding of like really deep within a vertical. And then of course being like, listen, like I can bring on other industry experts from other verticals. And then of course kind of have this like amalgamation of different experience put together. And if you want to do like other deals within other verticals, like all of a sudden it becomes a generalist shop.
Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah, interesting stuff, man. Other question was around, there's been a lot of consolidation in the vet space. What other segments of the pet industry do you gaining focus in the M&A market if you come across stuff yourself? Like Chewy was just massive, right? Obviously not within M&A space as a whole, but I feel like that was just like one macro factor post-COVID where of course like businesses like that had like really taken off.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, definitely the veterinary space, right? But I think outside of that, let's see, what I've noticed is that whatever's kind of becoming popular on the human side, we're seeing that being translated to the pet space. So like, I feel like there's a lot of diet trends, like, people want to go gluten-free or vegan or vegetarian, and you're seeing those same diets being implemented in different foods for dogs and cat. I think there's,
organic elements.
Exactly. And so I think people are willing to treat their dogs like kids. Exactly. I feel like I've become like the second or third favorite child after my parents got their dog. And so I think we're just seeing everything going on. Whatever's becoming popular on the human side, we're kind of seeing that directly translate to the pet side as well.
No, and you definitely see it with, call it like fresher food, right? You can actually buy like refrigerated food and just like feed your pet that instead of like the traditional like kibble. And I'm thinking about this more from like a dog perspective. Accessories galore, right? I mean, like these days you can buy like a stroller of north of like $1,000, right? For like a human baby. And I assume that's going to carry weight into, of course, kind of like the animal sector as well.
Yeah, exactly. You're already seeing like designer clothes for dogs and cats. So it's just a matter of time till, if that really blows up.
Anything else you've been following within private equity as a whole? Or do you kind of think, well, we can get to a market question right after, but if you have funds, obviously like a Platinum, like a CDNR, like a Genstar raising larger and larger vehicles, I mean, you tell me, right? Like, do you think like private equity has changed or changing kind of where you were even like a couple of years at a larger fund? Or do you think this like upward trend of larger and larger vehicles, larger check sizes will just continue? Like, when does it stop?
Yeah, I think kind of goes, I agree with your second point. People are like all these funds continue raising more and more cap means you got to do bigger check sizes. And actually, I don't really have an answer for that, to be honest.
Yeah. Any thoughts on market conditions as a whole, as you kind of like think about this and maybe what you've seen? I'm not sure if it comes down to multiples, but just in general, kind of like how your team's been thinking about the market going into 2023.
Yeah, so we definitely seen some contraction already on the veterinary side. I think the multiples are kind of nuts right now. Like individual clinics, they'll go anywhere from like 5 times EBITDA up to 20 times EBITDA. And the consolidators, we're seeing them at like 20 to 25 times. And people are definitely getting a bit more cautious on the multiple side. So I've seen like a couple turns of contraction recently, but it's still pretty high at the moment.
That makes sense. I think it's going to take some time, right? Like anything else.
Yeah, I'd hope so too.
Let's take a look here. Yeah, honestly, another market-based question, but basically, how's your team's deal appetite changed as we enter Q4? Do you vary, actually, Jay, if you don't mind me asking, a little bit more between like M&A and then, of course, like the strategy element, someone thinking about getting into a role where it's like, hey, listen, like I will be focused on corp dev strategy. I'm not sure if FP&A accounting is part of it, strategy at a higher level and ops is part of it, but what does that look like? And then, of course, we can get to this question as well. It kind of goes in tandem with the question here, basically like team's deal appetite, because if you're not doing deals, then of course you're focused on other organic growth initiatives.
Yeah, so on the strategy side, we've definitely, just given how crazy some of these mobiles are, we have been doing we've shifted part of our strategy to be doing de novo startups.
Okay.
And so we're building these hospitals ground up from scratch, and it's been really successful. Like the first one that we did, it's just as busy as some of these hospitals that have been open for 5, 10, 15 years.
Wow.
I think significantly cheaper. It's even more attractive to recruit doctors and staff to support the hospital with, more just modern, up-to-date operations and everything in the hospital. So it's really, it's definitely more attractive when it comes to recruiting and growing and, just attracting clientele altogether. The other strategy. So yeah, I guess, or what do you want me to elaborate on exactly?
No. I think that makes sense as a whole. And it really comes down to, of course, kind of that like market question around like deal appetite going forward.
Yeah. So we're a pretty small company. We've doubled over the last year, but we have a lot of hospitals in our pipeline, and we're definitely, we don't really have necessarily internal targets. We have to be at X number by this month or anything. Yeah. But we have a lot keeping us busy for Q4, and I don't think we want to just make sure every acquisition we do, we're able to handle it and just add appropriate personnel on the Kiro side to make sure we're able to do the best we can, but don't necessarily think anything's changed from like a market perspective or anything like that in terms of our deal flow.
Yeah. I don't know if you can hear, that's literally CJ, my dog, barking in the background. So sorry about that. Hopefully you don't hear too much. Perfect. Jay, any questions on our end? Of course, as you kind of like think about this, we'd love to learn, as you were a junior banker, mentors that helped you out along the way, as you thought about the career, as you thought about like different opportunities, because that really is kind of like what we're bringing forth here. Obviously, it's a lot of interview prep and like very targeted to help individuals think through next steps. But can you tell us a little bit more on your end, mentors that helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, I feel like definitely like starting off in undergrad, I joined that investment banking club. And so a lot of those seniors were able to guide me through different books and whatnot. We're always really gracious in terms of providing mock interviews and whatnot. And so that really helped kind of set the way into investment banking. And I think every job I've had, there's always been somebody a bit more senior who I've really looked up to and have tried to learn from them and just do the best job I can for them as well. Definitely it's important to find people that you look up to and just mentors that are willing to invest in you. And, ultimately you give that back to the community as well.
Yep. Did you get a lot of outreach I'm not sure if you get a lot of outreach, of course, I'm sure you do today, but also in general general when it comes to working at Platinum and before that around individuals just looking to learn more?
Yeah, I'm always happy to just jump on a call and kind of just pay for it. I feel like I wouldn't be here today without all the help that I've received. And so people are always, messaging on LinkedIn or Instagram or something, and busy days, but I'm always willing to make time for them.
Yeah, nice. No, good to hear. Any questions on our end? We'll definitely have to think through, of course, engaging Jay a bit further here, depending, of course, on time, but naturally understand that a bit more senior. So it's, you have the MD title too, right? I'll compensate you quite a bit on the coaching side.
Yeah, I'm happy to help.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Let's take a look here. Okay, we got a question around the current investment thesis at Kiro, if you're able, or what you're able to share.
Yeah, I guess current investment thesis is that we partner with good doctors. We know we have the tools and resources to be able to run a hospital more efficiently and better than, just an individual owner. And so I think that's a huge part of our thesis, is just that the value add that we can bring with all the resources from our end to, run the hospital better. So we're comfortable with what we can offer on the table. And then I guess some of the other stuff I'm just really not allowed to speak about yet.
Of course, for what you are able to say. I think with the last couple of minutes here, if you don't mind me asking, Jay, and you tell me how you're doing on time, maybe we can just do one or two more, if that's okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Perfect. Yeah, we had another individual ask about deal size, EBITDA revenue. We might have to keep that off the table, if that's okay. Obviously, there's just a certain level of privacy here. Tell us a little bit more, working at a large fund, working with a smaller team. Pros, cons, analysis as individuals think about this. Sometimes if there's a first-time fund that's hiring versus a larger firm, how do you think juniors should think about that? And kind of what went through your mind going from a large institution like a Merrill to, of course, where you are today through multiple avenues?
I think a huge advantage of the big companies is that there's so many resources available for you. They have intense training programs, and you're not going to be the first or second person who's done this job. There's probably have been hundreds, if not thousands before you in your shoes. So I think it's a lot more structured from that perspective. And I think that's a huge advantage. Whereas if you go to a smaller, there may not be as many protocols in place and everybody kind of just all over the place trying to figure out what to do. I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong way to do it. Ultimately, I've always just picked every job based on the people there that, who was interviewing me, who's going to be the deal team or who I'm going to be working with. Because I think if you look up to them and you see a lot of, those are the people that you respect and look up to, there's going to be a really
if you see yourself working with them, you want to work with good people, right? No one has time to, excuse my language, but that asshole rule really does stand and abide by. Or I think that really does resonate with many of the individuals that we work with today. And then of course, just as you get older, right, you're less and less tolerant.
Yeah, exactly.
No, I appreciate that, man. I think that makes a lot of sense. And I know you're on the road. So one, I appreciate you really doing this. And of course, two, don't want to take too much time away. But what a killer operator here, right? Literally on the road, meeting with sites, meeting with facilities. And then of course, I'm sure you are opening up the laptop, just getting to work. So appreciate that, man. And it's awesome to hear that, of course, kind of coming from banking where it's listen, you have to learn to function on a computer in a standard setting. And then you do the investing side of things, kind of in and out, you travel a little bit. But now tell me the truth, right? You could probably run on the road day in and day out. Sure, it's exhausting, but you can function at pretty darn high octane.
Yeah, that's true.
I love it. Awesome. Cool. Well, any other questions from your end? Any other comments? You tell me.
No, yeah. Thank you so much for having me. This looks like a really good company that you're out and be a part of it.
Thank you, Jay. No, much appreciated. One last, sorry, if you don't mind. How would you say banking helped get you where you are today? Or would you say that it did? I think I know the answer to that question, but.
Yeah. I feel like every job, I don't think it's hard to go into private equity without banking experience. It's not impossible, but it's definitely the odds are against you. So, and I also feel like banking, you're working so many hours, you're operating on 3, 4, 5 hours half the time on a live deal. And so it really instills that work ethic inside of you. And just, I think that was a super valuable part of the whole experience, is just, you got to be McCombs to operate on so little sleep and, do the job to 95% or 100%. So it was those lessons that really helped me, tour.
Teaches you how to work, right?
Yeah.
Are you hiring corp dev analysts, anything of the sort?
We just did, but once he's fully ramped up, I'll let you know.
Feel free. Yeah. Happy to, of course, advertise it, push it forward, because anyone that even attended this, of course, I think that's interesting, right? Because they clearly wanted to learn more about you and the opportunity as a whole compared to the traditional individual where you might send over here are 10 ops. And they're yeah, I'll interview at all 10. It's do you really have a preference and an order of priority? You might as well go for the individuals that are asking these questions, right? What does revenue EBITDA numbers look like? Hopefully it's not a competitor here, but just getting an understanding of someone who's genuinely passionate.
Yeah, definitely. Maybe there's some internship opportunities opportunities we could discuss for some of these younger folks.
Sure.
Yeah.
Of course. As you think about this, and I guess we can like really, really wrap this up with one last part. San Francisco. You love it? You hate it? How's it? How is it?
No, it's a good city. I definitely feel like
I
I like.
love it too, of course. So it's just some people have this perception.
Yeah, I feel like if you have like good friends and just enjoy it, you can honestly like the middle of nowhere and have a good time there too, if you're surrounded by good people. So I think that's what's most important. And, yeah.
100%. It all comes down to people, man. I'm a big proponent of that. Speaking of really some good people on this in this conversation and across the screen for me here. Thank you so much, man. Really appreciate
thank you. I appreciate it.
Of course. Safe travels on your end, of course, getting back home. From the internship perspective, from the first year perspective, feel free to let us know. If anything, we can send some good people over and I can let you know who all attended.
Yeah, that sounds good. Thank you.
Have a good one.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Enjoy the weekend.